Thank you, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Reed. And thank you for testifying here today. This is a topic that covers many issues I care deeply about. As a fifth-generation Montanan, we've got a lot of open space, a lot of roadways. In fact, we just wrapped up the election season. One of the candidates running for governor traveled 64,000 miles during the course of the campaign on the roads. So it kind of puts in perspective. We're not as big as Texas or Alaska or California, but we have to drive a lot more so than flying. So I care much about what you're talking about, saving lives, to improve passenger and freight mobility, very important for us in a state that requires moving our products, ag products particularly, around the world. And I'm very excited with these new technologies. I spent 12 years in the cloud computing business, executive capacity before I came to politics. So I wanted to follow up on Senator Reed's question on the cyber piece here, Dr. Rosekind. You said in your testimony, the quickest way to slam the brakes on innovation is for the public to lose confidence. I think that's well said. I was a private sector employee for 28 years, and the best of my knowledge did not have my information compromised until I became a federal employee. Then I got the letter from OPM. Thank you, federal government here. I never had that issue in the private sector.
I got that letter too.
Many of us did, right? I think I probably mentioned if we pulled the audience here, there'd be a lot of hands going up. So clearly, we want to make sure we're protecting the privacy and hardening our systems. Many of consumers no longer have confidence in the government. And I appreciate the fact you shared that you're bringing some advisory groups in to bring that perspective. Going fast is the speed of business out there sometimes I think government needs to do. How is NHTSA gaining the public's confidence with this latest guidance that you're looking at here as it relates to cyber?
I think in the policy, one of the ways actually that we're trying to do that is through the innovation approach. I think just like when people talk about regulation, when you talk about cybersecurity, if someone were to say regulate that, as you know, the speed that this stuff is changing, by the time you get through a 6 to 10 year regulation, it's not going to be relevant anymore. So one of the 15 safety assessment items is cybersecurity. Everybody's got to tell us how are you addressing that particular issue. And our intent here is to see as many different forms of innovation coming to us as we can. And the data will drive the safest and best way to protect these systems. In fact, at some point, if they're best practices, it should be based on that data. In the future, if there's rulemaking, it should probably be based as a foundation on whatever those best practices were.
So I know industry has been working collaboratively to address cyber and publish some best practices in July. How did NHTSA's guidance incorporate their experiences and expertise?
We had a lot of interaction with them. We knew what was coming. And in fact, I would highlight not just this policy, but our own best practices came out just a few weeks ago, and they complement exactly what we know what the industry was doing.
So I guess my understanding, though, they didn't go through a notice and comment process before being issued. I think afterwards, DOT solicited comments, and I think they're due next week. So my question, I guess, is why wasn't there more consultation with industry done before the guidance was issued?
Well, just let's keep them separated, which is the best practices came out a few weeks ago, and the policy came out September 20th. We're actually have an extensive amount of open time. So the policy is under a 60-day comment period right now. That closes November 22nd. And what's already identified in here is 23 next steps. So we actually have a whole new set of public meetings that are coming up to talk about all the different elements. We just did that last week. We had a meeting on the letter, which includes the cybersecurity part. So there's all kinds of other opportunity for people to add input.
And that's helpful. And I know Senator Collins was kind of talking about this a bit about some of these guidance which become quasi-regulation. You touched on the time required to go through the formal rulemaking process, and I think guidance allow you to be more nimble, but may not always be as transparent. I think that's one of the concerns we hear. Should voluntary guidance policies be used to expedite the rulemaking process or in federal enforcement action?
I think what we're trying to do is continue our enforcement and regulatory tools. We have those authorities. We're not giving any of them up. All we've done is try and complement those with a way to support innovation at this time. And it's absolutely possible, if you come in with the right data, that we will use that data to create best practices in rulemaking. We actually identify potential rulemaking in here as well. And so that is just one more tool that's being included to deal with this fast-paced technology.
Thank you. I'm running out of time. Dr. Kalra, question. You discussed lowering the risk to pilot programs. and raised questions about the ability of this technology to function better than humans in complex conditions. I come from a state that has a lot of rural roads. 54% of automobile fatalities occur on rural roads, despite the fact just 19% of Americans live in rural areas. How do you incorporate issues like we have in Montana of unmapped roads, gravel, snow, wildlife, where 95% of our roads are rural? And as we know, accidents often happen when things we don't anticipate occur. How do we lower the risk of these technologies in rural settings?
By testing them in those environments. And I'll point to the University of Michigan's testing center for autonomous vehicles, where they're committed to testing on different kinds of road surfaces, on different kinds of weather conditions. We need to get autonomous vehicles not only in sort of sunny Southern California, but also in Montana. And I think that has to be a priority.
Yeah, the sun shines a lot in Montana, but we also have ice and big elk out there at times.
I'm from North Dakota. I know that ice.
Oh, you do understand that. You do.
I do.
You understand ice better than I understand ice, I think. Anyway, thank you. I'm out of time.